Hi guys, welcome to this special He-Man episode review extravaganza where I'll be taking a look at the last 5 episodes of the first season of He-Man. These are Pawns of the Game Master, Golden Disc of Knowledge, The Huntsman, The Remedy, and The Heart of a Giant. You may be wondering, do these episodes have something in common for me to review them all in one video? Well, we'll get back to that at the end of the video, but let's turn our focus to Pawns of the Game Master. Now this episode kicks off with a one-off villain called the Game Master. No, not Kevin King. This guy with the goofy helmet. He arrives on Eternia planning on adding the mightiest warrior on the planet to his collection of gladiators. Take a big frickin' guess who, man? Well, unsurprisingly, He-Man doesn't want to join the Game Master's crew, so he sends a flying blue anteater to follow him to find a weakness. As we all know, He-Man's weakness is Teela. But let me backtrack for just a second to utter a flying blue anteater. Really? You can kinda tell they were hard pushed to come up with another weird and original creature. Well, Teela gets captured, but more importantly, in the ensuing chaos, Adam loses his sword, and so the crew of him, Cringer, and Orko set off to rescue Teela. Now the premise of this episode is really interesting. One of my favorite things about it is that the Game Master seriously considers capturing Ram Man and Beast Man first. Even more so because he says that Beast Man's wild nature makes him so that he can't be tamed. I guess he didn't see the Prince Adam No More episode. But more to the point, ouch! Is Ram Man really so good? Come on. Despite a pretty good premise and a really funny scene where Orko's faking out the Game Master into buying Cringer, this episode never really takes off. Paul Dini at least gave the script his best shot, with a lot of He-Man and Teela's dialogue having to do with whether she prefers Adam or He-Man.
You mean a lot to me.
You mean a great deal to me, too.
Sheesh, okay, get a room, you two. But unfortunately, I think the episode is just a little too slow-paced to be interesting. Plus, the Game Master really isn't a particularly memorable villain, with his abilities, appearance, and even his voice being all too bland. Next we have the Golden Discs of Knowledge, which starts with this, whatever the hell this is.
Just call me Adamo da Vinci. I think I'll get a little more watercoloring in before lunch. On second thought, lunch now, painting later.
Now after that, He-Man gets summoned to Castle Grayskull, where weird shit is happening, and we get one of my favorite offhand Orko comments of all time.
Well, looks like the sorceress is throwing some kind of far-out party.
As it turns out, Grayskull's being haunted by Xanthor, a wizard who's a recolor of Kor from Ordeal in the Darklands, and a former galactic enforcer who was once banished into a phantom state for giving away the Golden Disc of Knowledge to Skeletor. However, Xanthor discovered where Skeletor is holding the disc, so He-Man and the sorceress basically hold an interdimensional parole hearing for Xanthor with the last surviving galactic enforcer, that's right, Zodak. Zodak agrees to have Xanthor become partially human so that he and He-Man can reclaim the discs, as He-Man wants Xanthor to get another chance. And this is pretty much where all the cool parts of the episode end. Now the heroes do reclaim the discs and face off against Skeletor, sort of, and we discover that there's a giant, well, snake under Snake Mountain. But considering it's just a recolor of the snake creature we've seen several times before, the impact is just not very impactful. Now, again, I'd really want to like this episode since the writing is actually really good, and Xanthor's character is excellent, plus there's a lot of cool He lore that gets referenced in this episode. But the action scenes at Snake Mountain are just so middle of the road, yes, even with 3 of Skeletor's best henchmen appearing, that this episode just kinda misses the mark on this one very pivotal point. However, the ending is pretty good, so I won't spoil that, and I do have to say that the writing is pretty much this episode's biggest saving grace, with Orko being particularly on the ball in this one. It's a strong episode, but not a complete home run. Then we come to The Huntsman, which some of you may remember as making the honorable mentions on my all top 10 He-Man episodes list from like a million years ago. Finally, I'm getting around to reviewing it, because frankly, it's easily the best of the episodes I'm going to cover in this review. This episode is about He-Man trying to rescue the last unicorn. Not that one. Basically, a baron called Grodd wants it as an ultimate trophy. Adam and Teela fly off to try to reason with him, but since Grodd won't listen to them, Adam threatens his father will get involved. Grodd hires some ogres to take them out of the picture, and then things really amp up. Now this episode makes a big deal about hunting animals for sport, but it actually has a really disturbing element in the plot where it's revealed that Grodd doesn't actually kill the animals, but simply puts them in suspended animation, which is honestly even worse. Of course, He-Man ends up fighting some of the creatures as well. This episode has a very low-key plot, but what I love is that we have Adam acting somewhat princely for a change. The setting and the characters in this episode really stand out in a good way, and the dialogue is mostly really good. After all, it's a Larry DiTilio script. There's maybe one or two rough scenes, but overall, this is a really worthwhile episode.
This place gives me the creep.
Cringer, that's very rude. You apologize right now.
I'm sorry you live in such a creepy place, sorceress.
Cringer!
Then we come to the remedy, which sees He-Man and company traverse to the Crystal Mountains in order to find a cure for Rohad. Who's Rohad? Well, he's Duncan's mentor, who was bitten by a poisonous bug. Yet again, this is an episode with a lot of nice lore in it. We get to hear how Rohad saved Duncan's life when he was younger. Rohad also has an assistant called Nitro, who loves wearing his initial on his belt, and whose grandson Rohad was rescuing before he got bit. Yeah, that guy is that guy's grandson. Unfortunately, even though we get a pretty cute scene of He-Man rescuing a flying creature, the action parts of this episode aren't very interesting. The best new action animation is probably He-Man battling some kind of squid thing, but it's over pretty quickly. Honestly, the episode doesn't quite rise to the occasion, and I love when He-Man finally reaches the cure, it literally just looks like a big stick. So, not a bad episode, but the action parts aren't very interesting. And lastly, we come to The Heart of a Giant, which starts with Duncan forcing Adam and Orko to get a refill on his stash.
Let's find some of that saltweed and get back to the palace.
You three look for the weed and I'll go back to the palace.
That's my hero.
Orko runs into a big creature, gets scared, and hits a tree. The giant brings Orko back to his friends, and once Orko comes to, they become curious about who the creature is. It eventually turns out that the giant is on the run from an evil carnival owner who wants him for his sideshow. He captures the giant and Orko, who become friends, and the giant then tells that he moved into the mountains because he was sick of people ridiculing him for his huge size. Now, I got a comment on my He-Man Season 2 look-back reviews not too long ago expressing issues that I didn't mention this episode while discussing Monster of the Mountain, since Herman, aka the Tingler, was clearly recycled from this episode. But there's a reason for that, and that's because this episode, while it sort of foreshadows the plot of Monster on the Mountain, is nowhere near as good. Once again, it has a very unmemorable villain, and hell, with a character model recycling going rampant in this episode, it's not a wonder. I mean, look at this scene. Even if you've only seen my review vids, you should easily recognize most of these guys from past episodes. Now, the monster is an interesting character, but that's about it. There is a surprisingly high amount of new animation.
Whoa, this is a cool new background.
But I hate how He-Man and Duncan spent half the episode fighting a giant scorpion. And there's another rather undignified Stratos appearance. This episode is yet another one with some promise, but the really lackluster execution makes it so weak that the only reason I even remember it is because the characters are literally looking for weed at the start.
I need the weed for one of my experiments. He knew what you were looking for, Orko.
Be careful you don't get caught, He-Man.
So, at the start of this review, I posed a question of what these episodes have in common, and the ugly truth is the same. A lot of them have very promising story ideas, and occasionally even very deep writing, which just sadly doesn't work out so well because of the episode's direction, which is a theme common with many late season 1 episodes. Sure, you'll get the exceptions like Teela's Trial, Driel's Return, or The Witch and the Warrior, but mostly it's crap like Eye of the Beholder, Quest for the Sword, or The Castle of Heroes. So, while I do prefer He-Man's first season, it is largely because of all the standout episodes in the first half of the season. But The Huntsman at least shows that a low-key He-Man episode can also work well. And a lot of these episodes are worth watching if for no other reason than to see just how good the writing was getting at this point in the series run. Well, dudes, that's it for me this time. I'm TheHande, and I have Sulkweed, so can you.